Hello Neighbor was a game where, a lot like FNAF, I made sure to keep an eye on every post and update they put out. This game series was wacky. From the outrageous designs to the neighbor himself, you can clearly see why many of us mascot horror fans were so drawn to it. Hello Neighbor was a game that was once developed by Dynamic Pixels, but now has been taken over by the more infamous tinyBuild. The game had a very simple premise. You witness your next door neighbor acting a little sus. The player catches the neighbor as he's desperately trying to keep what sounds like a screaming child locked in his basement. Instead of calling the police like the wise lad you are, you take it upon yourself to find different ways to break into your neighbor's house, to get into his basement. And that's it, that was the game. Of course, theorizing nerds like us would be so obsessed with the game if there wasn't something dark and lurking in the shadows. Lore, secrets, ARGs, you name it, Hello Neighbor probably had it. But that's exactly what made this game so fun when it first came out in 2016. Hello Neighbor was released in alpha builds, that being the pre-alpha and alpha 1 through 4 respectively. Each update had us glued to our screens as we watched our favorite Let's Players dissect what secrets were waiting to be discovered. Dynamic Pixel would tease us by never really revealing what was in the basement at the end of the alpha build. Instead, mocking us by leaving a link to their website. Many secrets and theories came with each update. One of the most notable myths is the Golden Apple. Fans were so convinced that there was a way to receive a Golden Apple that the developers made it a feature within the alpha builds. It was fun additions like this that made it feel like Dynamic Pixels really cared about their fans, and took the time to build hype for their full release. Thankfully, the fans wouldn't have to wait much longer. The full version of the game was finally released on December 8th of 2017. After more than a year, we were all so excited to get our hands on it. And how was it? Well, it was surprisingly disappointing. The game was, and still is, incredibly buggy. There are still plenty of game-breaking glitches that still haven't been patched out. We got promises that the neighbor AI would be able to learn from the player, understand how we're getting into the house, and where he needs to put the traps. Cool concept, but half the time he's running full sprint into the corner of the house. How was this acceptable? The game was rushed, and there's no doubt about that. And these greedy and impulsive decisions don't end here. They don't learn their lesson. We see this reflected through every Hello Neighbor related title, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Going back to the first game, unlike all the other aspects, the story thankfully holds a lot of potential. Bear with me as I try my best to explain the story here. You start out by playing as a young boy who is kicking a ball through the neighborhood. All seems fine until you hear a shrill, childlike scream coming from the neighbor's house. Upon investigating, Mr. Peterson catches you and throws you out of his house. Your job is to break into the house and find a way into his basement. Using a red key found in the attic, you can finally unlock the basement. And what horrors are waiting to be discovered? A cult? Maybe someone's trapped down there? Or it could be a completely normal basement with nothing in it. Wow, what a waste of a build-up. I can't believe they... Oh! Okay, yeah, we're totally going in there. You discover a small room that seems to be a prison for a child. Diving deeper in, you come to find out that you're inside a dark labyrinth, and you must find a different exit before the neighbor catches you. Although you're nearly there, the neighbor catches you and locks you into the small room that you just discovered not too long ago. Feeling like this may be the end, someone unknown unlocks the door on the other side, giving you another chance to escape. Once the player climbs to the surface, the first thing that you notice is a massive fence built around the entirety of Mr. Peterson's property. Just like breaking in, there is more than one way to break out. What route did I go with? The cheating route. Years later after your escape, you're an adult now, experiencing adult things, like trauma and evictions. This leaves you no choice but to move back into your childhood home, forcing you to confront your childhood trauma head-on. Moving back was never going to be easy, and seeing Mr. Peterson's house now in ruins brings back traumatic memories, giving you a panic attack. This trauma manifests itself as a dark, jagged creature that lingers in the background, paralleling the trauma that has a hold on the player. Lying down on the couch, the player traps himself in a nightmarish dream, an exaggerated reimagining of his childhood trauma. The only way to escape is to get 3 different abilities from 3 different fear rooms. These rooms are focused on the player's anxieties, and are played out as such. The Fear School Nightmare has you running to the end of a hallway, having to time the bell ringing to escape the mob of dummies. At the end of the hall, a single dummy tries to attack you. This gives the player the ability to break free. The Fear Darkness room has the player shrunk down and trapped inside a pantry. You must make the journey upward and turn on the light using the pull string. Although it seems like an impossible leap, the player is granted the ability to double jump. Lastly, the Fear Supermarket room is filled with frantic dummies who are trying to shop. If you look at them, they will attack you. The player must keep his head down and collect groceries to exit the level. Once getting to the register, if you have the correct amount of items, you'll be let through, granting the player the final ability of invisibility. Harnessing the power of your newfound abilities, you are finally ready to venture to the basement. Running through the labyrinth one last time, you find yourself in the hallway that you were caught all those years ago. But this time's different. You push the neighbor down and unlock the door at the end of the hall, which leads you to a room. A child's room. Is it our room? Or maybe it's holy crap! You versus a giant house-shelled Mr. Peterson. You must find a way to get inside the house on the neighbor's back. Once you manage to find your way up there, you can finally process what you've gone through. Not just in these moments, but the player's entire life. The hold has finally been released and the player can now be free from Mr. Peterson and the creature who represents your fear, locked away in the house that once took you. The credits roll as the player wakes up and finishes unpacking, embracing our new outlook on life. The original Hello Neighbor story was amazing and almost inspiring. Taking a journey with this character and experiencing the terrifying events that he went through really made it rewarding in the end. Being able to watch him let go of that hold and start living his life made me really happy. Yeah, the gameplay wasn't good and it was downright ridiculous sometimes, but in my opinion, the story almost completely makes up for that. A lot of people must have felt the same way because not too long later, a Hello Neighbor sequel was announced. Hello Neighbor Hide and Seek was released 1 year later and would take place before the events of the first. The prequel starts by showing Mr. Peterson and his wonderful family, his wife, and his 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl, living the true cliché picture-perfect family life. You play through the creative imaginations of Mr. Peterson's 2 kids. Alright, before we really start dissecting this game, let's go ahead and begin with something that I liked, because there weren't a lot. The maps are incredible. Each time the kids go back to playing, the theme of the map changes. They feel like they were well thought out, but I wish I could say the same for the gameplay. Again, the game felt incredibly rushed and had an insufferable amount of glitches. You could honestly do what I just did at one point and just look up the cutscenes on YouTube. No one's gonna blame you, I promise. Alright, let's do this one last time. The story of Hello Neighbor 2 gives a lot of context to who Mr. Peterson is, and what drove him to be the antagonist we know him to be. As the kids are playing, Mr. Peterson comes home with some terrible news. Their mother died in a car crash. During dinner, they sit silent and distant from one another. Mr. Peterson becomes a depressed, absent father. Mr. Peterson Jr. becomes violent and aggressive towards his sister. He straight up shoots her in the eyeball. Things extend to the point where Junior takes his sister's doll and forces her to play hide and seek with it. Okay, get this. He places it on the plank that's just hanging outside of the attic window. You know, how those things usually go. Once his sister goes out to retrieve her doll, Junior gets upset and pushes her away. He doesn't realize that she's too close to the edge, and she falls to her death. The credits roll as the neighbor buries his own daughter in the yard. What a bummer ending! From a lore standpoint, the biggest questions have been answered, like who the neighbor was. He was a misunderstood family man who lost it all by chance. And who are the missing kids that were very prominent in the first game? Well, those were Mr. Peterson's kids. Surprise! Because of the accidental murder of his sister, Junior has been locked up in the basement by his father. This gives us the answer to the biggest and last mystery. What is in the basement? In the first game, we discovered that a child has been locked inside of the basement. Later in the game, we never really figure out what was in that basement. Instead, it becomes a metaphor for us letting go of our childhood trauma. Mr. Peterson's son has been locked in the basement, suffering a punishment with no end in sight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the complete story of Hello Neighbor, a perfect ending to one of the best game series that's ever been created. There's nothing more for them to do. us as a player was able to move on and become a better person. Of course, we didn't forget that trauma, but it makes us a better person, releasing that hold it had on us. In the second game, we learned Mr. Peterson's story and why he became the person he did. I'm just very satisfied with this game series and its ability to tie up loose ends. What do you mean there's 5 more games? Unfortunately, tinyBuild would not let this franchise rest. As the years go by, tinyBuild would bring us a new game every year, turning this once thriving franchise into an oversaturated mess of a series with 5 games, 7 books, and 2 seasons of their YouTube show. There is no end in sight. They are desperately trying to bring back the hype and popularity it once had, but that's a video for another day. Thank you all for watching. My name is Spooky Soup Boy, and I will see you all on the flip side.